Well, today, July 24th, 2010, saw a couple of firsts on the Virginia and Truckee Railroad. Now, whenever you're talking about railroad history, you have to always qualify your firsts. Hardly anything is really the first of anything. We're going to be looking at the McCloud number 18 locomotive through this video. Today, the two firsts were first revenue service to Carson City and back on a long run, and also the first time that the number 18 was coupled up to the Gold Hill and Silver City cars. Yesterday, I missed it, was a rather interesting first. The Virginia and Truckee Railroad, because they have the operating contract for the Reconstruction line to Carson City, has been adding a lot of equipment over the last couple of years. One piece of equipment is this McCloud 18, which has actually been in the picture for a few years now. I'll explain the history later. The other piece of equipment is what's called the D2 diesel, and that's an Alco diesel from PPL. It's a power company up in Montana. And yesterday, and again I missed this, but yesterday the D2 was running the short runs from Virginia City to Gold Hill, and I guess at some time during the day they broke out number 18, they uncoupled the D2 and coupled up the 18. So there were, and that was actually the first time either of those locomotives had done revenue service on the Virginia and Truckee Railroad. So this is going to be a good video, but I'm really kind of bummed that I missed out on yesterday. Here they fire up the dynamo. Now this locomotive has a history, not only a long one that goes back 100 years, but also a more recent political history, and even more recently was used for the filming of a movie called Water for Elephants. So watch this movie coming out sometime this year, I believe, Water for Elephants, and you'll see the McCloud number 18. Now, going back about 100 years, this was a logging locomotive for the McCloud River Railroad. And then somewhere, I'm not the authority on McCloud history, but from what I can gather, somewhere around the 1950s, this locomotive was moved to Eureka. Oh, he's going to blow the whistle to pull out. Now, like I said, this was moved to Eureka, and I understand that it blew out a piston or blew out the steam box. Something happened within the first few years, and it sat there for decades, just covered by a tarp out in the elements. So this locomotive has a multi-decade history of a lack of maintenance. Okay, back to the story. Somewhere around 2004, 2005, the government commission, and now I should clarify that you're looking at the private railroad operation, the Virginia and Truckee Railroad, but this locomotive is owned by the government commission that bought it. After this locomotive left Eureka in the 90s, it went back to the McCloud Railroad, which by then was a tourist railroad, and Jeff Forbis, the owner, did some restoration work, but as we've discovered this year, he missed a lot. He may not have missed it, but he didn't fix it. And I don't know his operation. I know people speak highly of him, so I can't really knock him for that. He had it in operating condition. However, when it was sold to the government commission, they didn't actually inspect the locomotive. This was always sort of rumored that the two railroad experts on the commission, Ron Allen and John Tyson, just bought the thing sight unseen, and that was actually confirmed by Bob Hadfield at a recent meeting, saying if he had it all to do over again, they would have done a full inspection and understood what they were getting into before they bought the thing. So the commission, being 9 non-railroad experts, political appointee, forgive the word, but it's true, hacks, who know very little about railroads, they leased this locomotive out to the Sierra Railroad operation in California. Sierra has always pitched themselves as the experts who could have run this thing soup to nuts. Somehow they were, after being chosen officially as the operator
in 2006
and pushing aside the V&T Railroad, the V&T Railroad came back into the picture last year as the only operator capable of actually running the operation. So Sierra was pushed out of the picture as the operator, and Sierra had been leasing this locomotive effectively for about $2,000 or $3,000 a year from the commission, and despite their claims that they were the experts, they continued to run this locomotive into the ground. Even when it came back from Sierra last year and was delivered, they had to disconnect a lot of the operating equipment before they could even tow it back up the hill, and it needed a lot of work. And this was discussed at several V&T commission meetings. I think they have at least $100,000 of repairs into this thing. And then at the last minute, when Virginia and Truckee Railroad was trying to get this ready for the operating season, then they decided to lease it out
for water for elephants. And that's really fantastic.
It's really neat, and they got $70,000 to the government commission, but it really put a crimp in the schedule to get this thing up and running. So they did what they had to get it in the movie. It came back, I believe, in May of this year, and after a couple more months of work, it's an old steam locomotive, so it still needs a lot of work, bearings and things like that, but it's good enough to go. And what you're seeing today is the first revenue run to Carson City.
Now these little speeders are following the train for fire protection. They stay about a half a mile behind and look out for any kind of fire.
What do you think, Gary?
Good morning. Gonna run the 18 for the first time to Carson City with a train.
There's your interview. You're not fun like Ed. Because there's only about 4 passengers, we only stay in the station about 5 minutes. As the train leaves the station, I turn around and there's Norm, who I call Mr. Nevada. He's been working for the V&T for years, not only selling tickets for the short runs, but he also does a lot of track work. The guy really works his butt off. Mr. Nevada! I got you some SpaghettiOs. What's going on?
Oh, hey, Norm, there's a hammer right there.
Now here's an extra hidden bonus. You notice I'm a little skeptical of the ability of this government commission to really get things done correctly. Obviously they bought this locomotive without knowing what they were doing. I'm going to play a little quote here. Anybody that can correctly tell me who is speaking it wins a free copy of my previous DVD from the Nevada State Railroad Museum, Living Steam, showing the number 22 Inyo. So if you know who this guy is, then speak now and I'll give you a free DVD.
Well, basically, my thought is this. Governments are designed to mislead people.
Boy, is that a cheery outlook? Unfortunately, it seems to be true in many cases. My favorite saying is the more local, the more yokel. Now, keep your eyes peeled here. This is part 1. I ended up getting too much footage to fit into a 10-minute video. So, part 2, I don't think I'm going to process it tonight. It's going to show the actual run-bys at Gold Hill, down by Overman Pit, and then down at American Flat. And I'm not going to speak in the next video, at least not very much. So if you're sitting there tearing out your hair going, will this guy shut up please, then you'll be happy with part 2. Have a good day. Thanks for watching.